Hollow Hills were not just a stretch of land nestled away from the busy towns. They were an enigma that lingered on the edge of local folklore for decades, a place that seemed to breathe its own mysteries into the lives of anyone who dared approach them. The air around the hills was thick with an unspoken tension, a weight that only those who had spent too much time there could truly feel. Some believed the land held secrets too terrible to surface, while others whispered of a curse that had plagued the Carter family for generations. It was a quiet fall evening when the Carter family made their fateful decision, a family known for their resilience, intelligence, and quiet prosperity. The Carters had long been regarded as the pillars of their community. They had lived on the outskirts of Hollow Hills for as long as anyone could remember. Over the years, their family had grown closer to the land, cultivating it, learning its secrets, and living in harmony with its shadows. However, they could never fully escape the pull of the hills, especially not the rumors that always seemed to circle them. And on that fateful evening, as the wind began to howl through the trees, the Carter family, father Charles, mother Eliza, and their two children Henry and Alice, decided to venture into the hills for what would be the last time anyone would ever see them. The day had started like any other. Charles had finished his work in the fields, Eliza had prepared their dinner, and the children played in the yard. But as twilight descended, a subtle shift in the air seemed to take place, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Charles, a man of reason, had heard the whispers, the rumors of something lurking just beyond the woods, something that had been passed down through the years. It was a story of disappearances, of strange happenings, but most of all, a story that the town refused to discuss. The hills, it seemed, were a place where people went missing, never to return. Though Charles had heard the tales, he always dismissed them as nothing more than the irrational fears of small-town life. But that evening, something felt different. Perhaps it was the way the wind howled against the old farmhouse, or the way the trees seemed to twist unnaturally under the dying light of the sun. Whatever it was, it struck Charles with a sense of urgency. The time had come to confront the mystery that had haunted his family for as long as he could remember. Eliza, ever the supportive wife, had agreed without question. When Charles suggested they walk into the hills, after all, what harm could a short trip to investigate the area possibly do? Henry and Alice, the two young children, were eager for an adventure, and so they all bundled up and set off into the fading light, the air growing colder as they moved farther from the safety of their home. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the landscape seemed to change. The ground beneath their feet became softer, and the trees loomed taller, their branches twisting into unnatural shapes. The path was narrow, lined with ancient stone markers that looked far older than the rest of the forest. It was almost as if the earth itself was trying to keep them out, as if something or someone was watching them with intent. For hours the family pressed forward, until they reached the heart of the Hollow Hills. It was then that Charles began to feel the weight of the land pressing in on them. The air grew colder, heavier, and a low, almost imperceptible hum began to fill the space around them. It was a sound that seemed to vibrate in the air, a low resonance that struck something deep in Charles's chest. Eliza, noticing the tension in her husband's face, reached out to him. "Charles, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice barely audible against the rising wind. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. It was as if the land itself had stolen his voice. Instead, he took a step back, instinctively placing his arm around Eliza and pulling her closer. The children, unaware of their parents' growing anxiety, continued to play, chasing each other through the thickening fog that had begun to roll in from the hill. Their laughter echoed in the distance, a stark contrast to the strange silence that had settled over the adults. "Come on, we should head back," Charles said, his voice hoarse as he turned to Eliza. But it was too late. Before they could make a move, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The vibrations were faint at first, a gentle shaking that barely registered beneath their feet. But as they turned to leave, the tremors grew stronger, the earth beneath them vibrating with an unnatural force. Trees began to sway violently, their branches whipping through the air. It was as if the forest itself was alive, shifting and twisting in response to some unseen force. And then, in the blink of an eye, the family found themselves separated. The world seemed to warp and twist, and the fog swallowed them whole. The last thing Charles saw before everything went black was the terrified face of Eliza, her hand reaching out to him, just as everything went silent. When the town finally realized the Carter family had vanished, they searched the hills for days, but there was no sign of the family, no trace of their footsteps, no evidence that they had ever been there. The only thing they found was a strange marking on the ground, a symbol that none of them could recognize, etched into the earth in a pattern that resembled a circle. As the search efforts turned up nothing, the town's rumors began to resurface, and the legend of the Hollow Hills grew darker. It was said that those who entered the hills were never meant to return, that the land had a strange power that claimed anyone who ventured too far into its heart. Some said the hills were cursed. Others whispered that they were a gateway to something far darker, something that could not be understood. Charles, Eliza, Henry and Alice were never found. They became another part of the mystery that surrounded the Hollow Hills, another chapter in the eerie history of a place that no one could truly understand. And so the legend of the Carter family lived on. Days passed without any word from the Carter family. The local sheriff, James Hawthorne, was the first to lead the search party into the Hollow Hills. He was a man of logic, a pragmatist, who prided himself on his ability to solve any problem. But as he stood at the foot of the hills, gazing up at the towering trees, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his stomach. It wasn't just the missing family that bothered him. It was the hills themselves, the strange way the fog clung to the ground, the ominous hum in the air that only seemed to grow louder as they ventured closer. It was almost as if the land was alive, breathing and waiting. Sheriff Hawthorne had heard the stories, of course. Everyone in town had. The Carter family was known for their strange connection to the land, and the rumors of something unnatural in the hills had been whispered for years. But he had always dismissed those stories as nothing more than superstitions and small-town gossip. People got scared of the unknown. It was only natural. But now, standing at the edge of the forest, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the tale than he had ever imagined. He glanced at his team. There were 6 of them, local men who had grown up in the area, men who knew these woods like the back of their hands. They were all seasoned trackers, and they had been part of countless search efforts over the years. But as they stood there ready to venture into the Hollow Hills, none of them spoke a word. The air was thick with an unspoken fear, and it hung heavy between them like an invisible weight. Without a word, Sheriff Hawthorne led the group into the hills, their footsteps barely audible against the soft earth. The trees were dense, their twisted branches reaching out like bony fingers, blocking out most of the light. It wasn't long before the path became almost impossible to follow. They had brought torches, but the fog rolled in thicker by the minute, and soon the forest seemed to swallow them whole. As they trudged deeper into the woods, the sound of cracking branches echoed through the silence. At first it was just the wind, but as they continued, the sounds became more distinct. Footsteps, twigs snapping underfoot, the unmistakable sound of someone or something moving just out of sight. Sheriff Hawthorne stopped in his tracks, raising a hand to signal the others to halt. He turned to the group, his face grim. "Did you hear that?" The men nodded, their eyes wide, scanning the shadows around them. For a long moment, they stood in complete silence, waiting for any sound, any sign that they weren't alone. The only thing they could hear was the sound of their own breathing, and the distant rustling of leaves, carried on the wind. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. The woods were silent again, as if whatever had been there had vanished into thin air. "All right," Sheriff Hawthorne said, his voice steady but tinged with unease. "Let's keep moving." They pressed on, moving deeper into the heart of the hills, and soon the land began to shift. The trees grew older, their trunks thick and gnarled, their roots twisting out of the ground like veins. The fog thickened, and the path became more treacherous. But they continued onward, driven by the need to find answers. It wasn't until they reached the clearing that they found something that made their hearts stop. The ground was marked with a series of strange symbols, carved deeply into the earth in a circular pattern. At the center of the symbols lay a single stone, weathered by time but unmistakably out of place. It was large, round and flat, its surface smooth as if it had been carefully shaped. Sheriff Hawthorne crouched down to inspect it, his eyes narrowing as he ran his fingers over the surface. "These symbols," he muttered, under his breath. "They're not like anything I've ever seen before." The men gathered around him, inspecting the strange marking. Some of the symbols resembled ancient runes, but others were completely unfamiliar. They seemed to pulse with a dark energy, as though they were alive, their edges glowing faintly in the dim light. "It's a ritual," one of the men said, his voice trembling. "A dark one." Hawthorne stood up, a cold shiver running down his spine. "This is no ordinary symbol. And this," he gestured to the stone in the center of the circle, "this is no ordinary stone." The air seemed to grow colder as the men stood in the clearing, the feeling of unease growing with every passing second. But it was Alice's voice that broke the silence. "Look," she shouted, pointing to the ground. There, lying in the dirt, was a small object, a lock. Sheriff Hawthorne knelt down, his hands trembling slightly as he picked it up. It was old, its surface tarnished with age, but the engraving was still visible. He turned it over, revealing the Carter family crest. The locket was unmistakably from their family. "How did this get here?" Hawthorne whispered, his voice barely audible. The men stood in silence, staring at the locket, the weight of the discovery settling heavily on their shoulders. It was as if the missing Carter family had left them a clue, a final message hidden in plain sight. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps broke the silence again. This time it was louder, closer, and before anyone could react, a shadow appeared at the edge of the clearing. "Who's there?" Hawthorne called, his voice firm but anxious. There was no answer, only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. But as they turned to leave, something caught Hawthorne's eye, a figure standing in the distance, watching them from the shadows. It was too dark to see their face, but the shape was unmistakably human. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice urgent. "I'll check it out." He moved toward the figure, his footsteps quick but measured. But as he approached, the figure vanished into the woods, disappearing as if it had never been there at all. Hawthorne stopped in his tracks, his heart racing. Something was wrong. The hills weren't just hiding the Carter family, they were hiding something far darker. "We need to get out of here," he said, his voice trembling. And so they turned and began to make their way back to town, the feeling of being watched never leaving them. The days following their return from the Hollow Hills were clouded with unease. Sheriff Hawthorne and his team had found nothing but more questions, and each one felt heavier than the last. What was the true nature of the symbols they had uncovered in the clearing? Who, or what, had been watching them from the shadows? And most importantly, what had happened to the Carter family? The discovery of the locket was a pivotal moment, but it raised more questions than it answered. Alice had carefully stored it in a small cloth pouch, and every time Hawthorne touched it, the weight of the unknown seemed to press down even harder. The locket itself was a silent witness to the disappearance, a thread tying the Carter family to something much larger, far darker than any of them had anticipated. Sheriff Hawthorne couldn't shake the image of the shadowy figure he had seen in the distance that night. Whoever or whatever it was clear it had been waiting for them. But waiting for what? What were they looking for? And why had they decided to reveal themselves now after all these years? It was only after a restless night, filled with uneasy dreams and disjointed thoughts, that the sheriff decided to go back to the town's old archives. He knew the Carter family had always been a quiet presence in the community, but there had to be more to their story. He needed answers, and the only way to get them was to dig deeper. As Hawthorne stepped into the dimly lit archives, the musty scent of old paper and dust filled the air. The town's records stretched back centuries, filled with the stories of families and events long forgotten. The walls were lined with wooden shelves, each one sagging under the weight of countless leather-bound books, yellowed scrolls and faded maps. He walked slowly past the rows of documents, his fingers brushing against the covers, feeling the weight of the history within. He reached the section on the Carter family. There, among the yellowed papers, was a single file with their name on it. It was thin, almost too thin,
considering how prominent the family had once been in the town. As Hawthorne opened the file, he found a series of letters, some dated decades ago, others more recent. The first few pages detailed the family's history. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. They had been a family of modest means, the kind of people who kept to themselves and worked hard. The file mentioned little of their past, other than their quiet life in the hills and their occasional visits to town. They were well liked, respected in their own right. But as Hawthorne read further, his breath caught in his throat. There, buried among the mundane records, was a letter from the town's old mayor, written in an almost frantic hand. The letter had been dated just 2 weeks before the Carter family had vanished. It read, "There's something wrong with the Carter family. They've been acting strange, almost like they're preparing for something. I'm worried for them. I don't know what it is, but I fear the hills are calling to them again. They've always kept to themselves, but recently I've seen things I can't explain. Please, someone must check on them before it's too late." The letter was signed, Mayor Clarence Brooks.
The mayor had mentioned the hills, the very same hollow hills where the sheriff had ventured with his team just days earlier. The mayor's concerns were the first real indication that something was amiss, but it was too late. 2 weeks after the letter was written, the Carter family had disappeared without a trace. Hawthorne read the letter again, his mind racing. Was it possible that the Carter family had known something was coming? Had they anticipated their own disappearance? Or had they been dragged into something far darker than they could have imagined? As he continued to sift through the pages, a single sheet of paper slipped from between the letters. It was an old, faded map of the town, with a red X drawn over the location of the Carter family's property. At the bottom of the map, written in the same hurried scroll as the letter, was a single sentence: "The secret is buried deep beneath the hollow hills. Only those brave enough to uncover the truth will survive." Hawthorne's heart skipped a beat. The words were cryptic, but they left no doubt. Whatever had happened to the Carter family, it was tied to the land itself. The hills weren't just a place to them. They were a part of something much older, something that stretched back long before the town had been founded. He took the map and folded it carefully, tucking it into his coat pocket. This was the breakthrough he had been waiting for. The pieces were starting to fit together, but there was still so much left to uncover. Sheriff Hawthorne had made a decision. He would return to the hills, but this time he wasn't going alone. He reached out to the one person he knew could help him unravel the mystery: the town's historian, Clara Dunn. She was a woman of great knowledge, with an extensive understanding of the town's history, particularly the families that had lived there before the modern era. She had lived in the town her entire life, and had an uncanny ability to dig into the forgotten corners of its past. Hawthorne met Clara at the town hall that evening. Her face, as usual, was stern and serious, but when she saw the map in his hand, her eyes narrowed. "What is it, Sheriff?" she asked, her voice quiet but urgent. "What did you find?" Without a word, Hawthorne handed her the map. Clara took it, her fingers tracing the red X that marked the Carter family's property. "The Hollow Hills," she whispered, as if the name itself carried a weight. "I've always suspected there was more to those hills than anyone realized, but this confirms it. You know something about them?" Hawthorne asked, his voice rising with urgency. Clara didn't answer immediately. She stared at the map for a long moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Finally she spoke. "There are stories, old stories, tales of a hidden place beneath the hills. A place that the original settlers here found when they first came. They believed it was cursed, so they buried it, sealed it off from the world. But over the years the land began calling to those who were connected to it. And the Carter family," she hesitated, looking away. "They were the ones who had been chosen to unearth it." Hawthorne's heart pounded in his chest. The Carter family hadn't just disappeared. They had been drawn into something much larger, something that had been waiting for them. "There's more to this than we realize," Clara continued. "And whatever they uncovered, It wasn't meant to be found. Hawthorne stood silent, the weight of Clara's words sinking in. It was clear now that the truth about the Carter family's disappearance was buried deep beneath the hollow hills, and it was a secret that would change everything. The next morning, Sheriff Hawthorne and Clara Dunn stood at the edge of the hollow hills, the dense trees around them, casting long, crooked shadows across the land. A chill had settled in the air, and the wind seemed to whisper secrets as it rustled through the branches. The hills were as quiet as they had always been, but to Hawthorne they now felt alive with danger. There was a sense of unease that gripped his chest, an instinct that told him the truth he was seeking was far darker than he had ever imagined. "We're not going to like what we find," Clara said, breaking the silence. Her voice was low, her gaze fixed on the dense forest ahead. "But we have to go in. Whatever's hidden here, it's not going to stay buried forever." Hawthorne nodded grimly. "I know, but I'm not leaving until I understand what happened to the Carters, and to this land." Clara had lived in this town her entire life, but even she couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that had settled over her. The more she learned about the Carter family's connection to the Hollow Hills, the more she understood how deeply entangled they were in the land's dark past. The family had been drawn to these hills for a reason, an ancient reason, and now it seemed they had paid the price for it together. They began their trek into the woods. The air grew colder as they descended deeper into the forest, the trees towering above them like silent sentinels. The path was uneven and overgrown, a stark contrast to the well-maintained roads around the town. It was clear that few had walked this path in recent years. As they walked, Clara spoke, her voice quiet but tinged with a hint of fear. "The original settlers didn't just stumble upon this land, Sheriff. They knew what was here. They were looking for something powerful, something they couldn't control." "Powerful?" Hawthorne asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Clara replied, "and dangerous. They thought they could lock it away, but something happened here. Over time, the power of the land began to draw people in. The Carter family was just the latest to feel its pull." Hawthorne glanced over at Clara, his brow furrowed. "But they're gone now. The Carters are gone. What are we supposed to find?" Clara paused, looking around the dense forest. "I don't know, but it's tied to the hills, Sheriff. It's always been tied to the hills. Whatever the Carter family found, it wasn't something they were meant to uncover, and now we have to find out why." The journey took them deeper into the woods, and the path grew narrower, the trees closing in around them. The air felt thick, as if something ancient and forgotten was watching them from the shadow. Clara's steps quickened as she moved ahead, clearly more familiar with the terrain than Hawthorne. The sheriff kept his hand on the holster of his gun, but it was more out of habit than necessity. They were in a place where the laws of man didn't seem to apply. After what felt like hours, Clara stopped suddenly. She raised her hand, signaling Hawthorne to do the same. "We're getting close," she said, her voice barely audible. Hawthorne followed her gaze. Ahead, in the distance, the forest cleared slightly, revealing a small overgrown clearing. At the center of it stood what appeared to be an old stone structure, half buried beneath a mass of vines and moss. The stones were weathered and cracked, but they held a sense of permanence, an undeniable presence that made Hawthorne's skin crawl. "That's it," Clara whispered. "That's what they were looking for. That's the place they found." The sheriff's heart raced as he stepped closer, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. This was no ordinary clearing. This was something ancient, something that had been waiting here, hidden from the world. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, as if the ground itself was alive, and for the first time Hawthorne realized that whatever lay ahead, he was not prepared for it. As they approached the stone structure, Clara crouched down, brushing aside the thick vines that had grown over the entrance. Beneath the moss and dirt, an inscription was barely visible, etched into the stone. Clara ran her fingers over it gently, reading the words aloud in a whisper. "To those who seek, beware, the price of knowledge is steep, and only the foolish will pay it." Hawthorne's stomach tight. He had known that this search would lead them to something dark. But this felt different. There was a warning here,
something more than just a mere inscription. It felt like a curse that had been placed on this land long before the Carter family had come here. The Carters didn't just stumble upon this, Clara said, her voice trembling. They were meant to find it, but what they uncovered, it wasn't meant to be known. Hawthorne didn't need to ask what she meant. He could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, the sense of foreboding growing stronger with every step they took. With a deep breath, he reached for the heavy stone door, his hands shaking slightly as he pushed against it. It creaked loudly, its ancient hinges protesting as the door slowly opened. The smell of damp earth and decaying wood hit them, and for a moment, Hawthorne hesitated. Clara stepped forward first, her eyes scanning the darkness beyond. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is where the story ends, and where it begins again." With a nod, Hawthorne followed her inside, the darkness swallowing them whole. As they stepped deeper into the structure, the air grew colder, the silence deafening. The walls of the stone building were lined with carvings, symbols, runes and images that Hawthorne couldn't begin to understand. They were ancient, older than the town, older than the settlers who had first come here. At the far end of the room, there was a stone pedestal, and on it, a book. The book was old, its leather cover cracked and worn, but the pages inside were pristine, untouched by time. It seemed to call to them, as though it had been waiting for someone to open it, waiting for someone to reveal the secret it held. Clara stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached for the book. "This is it, Sheriff," she said softly. "This is what they found. This is what they were never meant to know." As she opened the book, a rush of cold air surged around them, and for a moment, the world seemed to shift. Hawthorne felt a strange pull in his chest, as if something deep within the earth was awakening, stirring. And then, as Clara began to read the ancient words, the ground beneath them trembled, and the darkness seemed to close. As Clara opened the ancient book, the air around them grew heavier, and the shadows in the room seemed to grow deeper. For a moment, everything was still silent, save for the sound of the wind outside. But then, the whispers. At first it was faint, like the murmurs of an old memory just beyond reach. But as Clara turned the pages, the whispers grew louder, almost intelligible, as if the very walls of the room were speaking. Hawthorne felt a cold shiver race down his spine. The unease that had settled in his chest deepened, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if he wanted to know what was inside that book. "Clara," Hawthorne's voice was barely a whisper, filled with hesitation. "What's in there?" Clara didn't answer right away. She was fixated on the pages, her eyes wide as she read the strange, ancient text. She wasn't reading out loud, but it was clear from her expression that what she was seeing wasn't just any ordinary story. Something about the words was making her tremble. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, she closed the book with a sharp snap, her breath catching in her throat. Her hands shook as she held the book close to her chest, but her gaze never left the pages. This isn't just a journal or some old text," she whispered. "This is something else, something dangerous." Hawthorne's heart raced as he stepped closer. "What is it? What does it say?" Clara opened the book again, turning to a page marked by strange, indecipherable symbols. "It's a ritual," she said, her voice shaking. "A dark ritual, Sheriff, one that was meant to bind something to this land." Hawthorne's mind raced, his instincts screaming that they were no longer just investigating the disappearance of the Carter family. They had stumbled upon something much more sinister. "The Carter family," Clara continued, her voice barely audible. "They didn't just find this place, they were chosen to uncover it. The book, it's written by someone who knew how to summon the darkness that lurks in these hills. And that darkness, it's been waiting for someone to wake it." "Someone?" Hawthorne echoed, his mind spinning. "You mean they tried to bring something here? Something ancient?" Clara interrupted, her eyes wide with fear. "This land has always been cursed, Sheriff. The Carter family, they were the latest to be pulled into it. The rituals performed here, long before the settlers arrived, are what gave these hills their dark power." Hawthorne felt his stomach tighten as he tried to wrap his head around what Clara was saying. "So what happened to them? Why did they vanish?" Clara looked at the book once again, her eyes narrowing As she scanned the pages, the Carter family didn't just vanish, Sheriff. They were taken, not by a person, but by the land itself. This book, it details how the land chooses its victim, how it takes those who try to uncover its secrets, and the more you learn, the closer you get to it, the more power it has over you. Hawthorne felt a cold dread settle in his chest. He had always believed in justice, in finding the truth, no matter how dark, but this was something far beyond his comprehension. We need to leave, Hawthorne said urgently, his instincts flaring. We've uncovered enough. This place is cursed. We need to get out before. But Clara shook her head, her face pale. No, Sheriff, you don't understand. We can't leave now, not after everything we've learned. The Carter family didn't get a chance to finish the ritual. They were taken before they could complete it. But if we leave, if we don't stop this now, we could be next. Next, Hawthorne repeated, his voice rising. What do you mean? You said the land chooses its victims. It's not like we're part of the Carter family. Clara interrupted him again, her voice sharp with panic. That's just it, Sheriff. You don't have to be part of the family. The land doesn't care about that. It just wants to and it feeds on those who get too close to its secrets. The Carter family was just the most recent victims. But now we're too deep in. The moment we opened this book, we became part of it. We've awakened something. Hawthorne stepped back. His mind raced. The walls of the room felt as though they were closing in on him. The whispers, those quiet, eerie sounds that had been growing steadily since they had entered the structure, were now louder, closer, almost like breathing. The floor beneath them creaked, as if in response to Clara's word. The very ground seemed to shift beneath their feet. And for the first time, Hawthorne felt as though the land itself was alive. He could almost feel it, the dark presence that lurked just beneath the surface, waiting to claim him. What do we do? He asked, his voice low. Clara's gaze was locked on the book, her fingers tracing the strange symbols etched into the pages. We have to stop it. We have to finish what the Carter family couldn't. Otherwise this place will never let us leave. The ritual must be completed. The book is the key. Hawthorne's heart pounded in his chest. The truth was clear now. Whatever the Carter family had stumbled upon, it was no longer just a story. It was real, and the ancient power of these hills was waking up, feeding on their fear. But how do we finish? Hawthorne asked, his voice filled with both desperation and disbelief.
Clara turned the pages of the book once again, her eyes scanning the ritual instructions. The book describes the ceremony, the steps they took to bind the land, to control the power that exists here. But there's a price no one can pay, not unless they're willing to sacrifice everything. The realization hit him like a wave crashing against the rocks. Sacrifice, he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. What kind of sacrifice? Clara closed the book slowly, her fingers trembling. The kind that costs everything, Sheriff. The Carter family didn't vanish by accident. They became part of the land. They gave their lives to complete the ritual, but they were stopped before it could be finished. If we're to stop this curse from taking anyone else. She stopped, her voice faltering as the weight of the truth settled in. The air around them felt thicker, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Clara's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear and understanding. We have to finish what they started, she said, her voice trembling. We have to make the sacrifice. Hawthorne took a step back, his mind reeling. No, he said firmly. No one's making any sacrifices here. We're getting out of this place, Clara, and we're bringing the truth with us. But Clara's eyes were distant now, lost in the pages of the book. There's no way out, Sheriff. Not anymore. You've already seen too much. The ground trembled beneath their feet again, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent, and then with a final chilling whisper, Clara spoke. It's too late. It's already begun. Clara's words hung in the air like a dark omen, echoing through the room. The weight of what she had just said pressed down on Hawthorne's chest, and for the first time he felt utterly powerless. The walls seemed to pulse with an energy he could neither understand nor escape. The book in Clara's hands was no longer just an ancient artifact. It had become a beacon, calling forth something from deep within the earth. "I don't care what you think you know, Clara," Hawthorne said, his voice steady despite the rising panic inside. "We're leaving this place, and we're taking that book with us. We'll bring it to the authorities. Let them know what's been happening here. This curse ends now." Clara's eyes flickered to the book again, then back to Hawthorne. Her expression softened, but there was a deep sorrow in her gaze. "You don't get it, Sheriff," she whispered, her voice strained with a kind of desperation. "The curse isn't just about the Carter family. It's about the land. It's about everything this place has ever touched. Once you open the door, there's no going back. It's never going to stop until we finish what was started. The land will keep calling, and if we leave without completing the ritual..." She paused, and for the first time Hawthorne saw true fear in her eyes. "They'll come for us," Clara finished, her voice barely a whisper, "and when they come, they won't stop." A chill ran down Hawthorne's spine. His mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. The Carter family had vanished. The land had claimed them, and now it was coming for them. But he wasn't going to let that happen. He wasn't going to let this land, this curse, take anyone else. "We're leaving," Hawthorne said again, more forcefully this time. He turned toward the door, his hand reaching for the handle. But before he could turn it, the room seemed to shift. The air grew thick. The shadows on the walls elongated, as if stretching to swallow the light. The whispers had grown louder, no longer mere murmurs, but an oppressive chorus, urging him to stay, to listen. Hawthorne's heart raced, and his hand faltered on the doorknob. "Sheriff," Clara's voice cut through the rising tide of panic. "The land is alive. You can't run from it. You can't outrun what it wants. If you try to leave now, you'll bring it with you. You'll bring the darkness, and it won't let you go." Hawthorne's mind reeled as he turned to face her. "Then what do you want me to do? Just sit here and wait to be claimed like the Carter family?" Clara looked down at the book, her hands trembling as she held it. "We have to finish the ritual," she said, her voice tinged with despair. "The Carter family didn't have a choice. They didn't get to finish it. And now the land is angry. It's calling, Sheriff. It won't let us leave until we finish what they started." Hawthorne's breath caught in his throat. The ground trembled beneath their feet, the room seeming to pulse with an unseen force. The whispers were now a cacophony, like voices from another world, growing louder and more insistent. "You have to understand," Clara continued, her voice breaking. "The Carter family didn't die by accident. They were sacrificed. This land doesn't just take people. It takes their souls, and it uses them. It feeds off of them, and the longer we stay, the more power it has." Hawthorne could feel the terror rising in his chest, but something else was rising as well. A sense of duty, a sense that they had no choice but to follow through. The land had already claimed too much, and if they didn't finish what the Carter family had started, it would keep taking, keep feeding. But there was one question that Hawthorne couldn't shake. "And if we finish it, what happens then?" Clara's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope, a faint glimmer of something that wasn't fear. "If we finish it, the land will be bound," she said softly. "The curse will be sealed, the darkness will retreat, but it requires a sacrifice." Hawthorne's heart skipped a beat. A sacrifice. The weight of the word hung in the air like a blade, ready to drop. "A sacrifice," he repeated, his voice hoarse. "What kind of sacrifice?" Clara took a deep breath and nodded toward the book in her hand. "The book tells us what must be done. The ritual is clear. It demands blood. Fresh blood. The land must be appeased. A life must be given." Hawthorne's mind raced as the implications of Clara's words hit him. "No," he said, shaking his head violently. "I won't do that. I won't." But Clara's gaze never wavered. "The land has already claimed so much, Sheriff. The Carter family, they didn't choose to be the ones to sacrifice themselves. But we're here now, and the curse will never end.
until we finish what they started. If we don't do this, the land will keep taking. It won't stop with us. Hawthorne felt a chill settle deep in his bones. The air seemed to grow heavier, the whispers growing louder, more urgent. There was no escape, not anymore. And yet the decision still loomed over him like an unsolvable riddle. He had spent his entire life chasing justice, chasing the truth. But this was different. This was a truth he didn't want to know, a price he wasn't sure he could pay. I didn't sign up for this, Hawthorne muttered, his voice barely audible. I know, Clara said softly, her voice filled with sadness. But sometimes, Sheriff, the land chooses us, and when it does, we have no choice but to face. For a moment they stood there, the weight of what Clara had said sinking in. The ritual, the sacrifice, the land's endless hunger. The land had taken the Carter family, and now it was calling for them. And Hawthorne knew deep in his gut that they were the ones who had to stop. But at what cost? The room was thick with tension, heavy with the kind of air that clings to your skin, like it knows something you don't, and it's waiting for you to find out. Hawthorne stood motionless, the weight of Clara's words still lingering in the space between them. The land needed a sacrifice. The Carter family had paid the price. Now, it seemed, it was their turn to fulfill the ritual, or risk becoming its next victims. Clara's grip on the book tightened, her knuckles turning white. She knew what was coming. She had known it all along. Hawthorne, on the other hand, felt like he was teetering on the edge of something far darker than he could ever have imagined. He had come here seeking answers, but all he had found were more questions, and none of them had good answer. I don't know if I can do this, Hawthorne muttered, more to himself than to Clara. His voice was raw, strained with disbelief. I didn't sign up to play God to decide who lives and who dies. Clara's eyes were sorrowful, but there was an undeniable resolve in that. We're not deciding, Sheriff, she said quietly. The land has already decided for us. We're just completing the cycle. The shadows in the room seemed to deepen, stretching like dark fingers across the wall. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows, and the house groaned in response, as if it too were waiting, holding its breath. The ritual had already begun. The book in Clara's hands seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its ancient pages trembling as though they could feel the proximity of the inevitable. Hawthorne swallowed hard, glancing around the room. He could hear the soft murmur of the whispers again, growing louder, more insistent. It was as if the house itself was alive, urging him to move, to act, to seal the fate of the family, and perhaps his own as well. We don't have time, Sheriff, Clara said, her voice firm, almost commanding. If we don't finish this now, if we don't follow through, the land will never be at peace. The Carter family, the children, the others, they'll never be able to rest. He turned toward her, his eyes wide. What do you mean, the others? Clara didn't answer at first. She took a deep breath, then spoke, her voice thick with regret. The land doesn't just take the people it wants, it takes their spirits too. It traps them. The Carter family didn't die just because of the land's curse. They were taken. Their souls are still here, caught in the hollows of the earth, waiting to be freed. Hawthorne shook his head, disbelief clouding his thoughts. You're telling me their spirits are still here? Clara nodded grimly. Yes, they are part of the land now, and the only way to release them, to free them, is to finish the ritual. The room seemed to close in on Hawthorne, the walls narrowing, the air growing suffocatingly dense. It was as if the house itself was watching, listening, waiting for him to make his choice. The book in Clara's hands felt heavier now, as though it were pressing down on him, forcing him to acknowledge the truth of what they had to do. Clara opened the book, her fingers brushing over the ancient pages, the words seemingly coming alive beneath her touch. She stopped on a page, and Hawthorne could see the strange symbols etched into the parchment, symbols he couldn't understand, yet they felt strangely familiar, as though they were woven into the very fabric of the land. This is it, Clara said softly, her voice trembling slightly. The ritual has to be completed before the moon sets. The land's hunger will only be sated once the blood is spilled. Hawthorne's stomach turned. He could hear the wind howling outside, Feel the cold seep into the bones of the house. The clock on the wall ticked louder now, the seconds stretching out like an eternity. He looked at Clara, her face pale, her eyes filled with a sorrow he couldn't quite place. She wasn't just afraid, she was resigned to what they had to do. "What happens after?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Clara's lips trembled, but she didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the book, her fingers tracing the words. "After the ritual is complete, the land will be bound, the curse will be lifted, the spirits will be freed, and the house, it will stop calling, it will stop feeding." Hawthorne felt a shiver run down his spine as the weight of her words hit him. He had known what had to be done, but hearing it spoken aloud made it all too real. He had never believed in things like curses, spirits, or rituals. He had been a man of law, of reason. But now, as he stood in the heart of the Hollow Hills, he was beginning to understand that there was no reasoning with the land. The land didn't play by the same rules. Clara handed him the book, her hands trembling. "We have to make the choice, Sheriff," she said softly. "The sacrifice, one life." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Hawthorne could feel his pulse quicken, his mind racing. The choice was his. The ritual had to be completed. The blood had to be spilled. But whose blood? Who would be the one to give up their life to appease the land? Who would bear the weight of this cursed place? He looked at Clara, and for the first time, he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the fear. She had known this moment would come. She had known what it would cost. "You said the land chooses," he whispered, almost to himself. "But it's not the land that chooses, it's us. We choose." Clara's gaze locked with his, and for a long moment, there was silence between them. The whispers had stopped, the wind had died down. All that was left was the ticking of the clock, the sound of their breaths, and the knowledge that the ritual had to be completed. Hawthorne reached for the book, his fingers brushing over the pages. The weight of it felt heavier now than ever before. He had no more time to hesitate. The ritual had already begun, and the choice, no matter how much he wished it weren't his to make, was his alone. The land had claimed too much. It had claimed the Carter family. It had claimed the children, and now, it would claim him, or someone else. The night seemed to grow colder, the walls of the old house pressing in as if trying to suffocate any remaining hope. Hawthorne stood at the center of the room, the book in his hands heavy with the knowledge of what needed to be done. Clara stood across from him, her face as pale as the moonlight spilling through the grimy windows. There was no turning back now. The ritual had already started, and the land was waiting for its payment. Hawthorne could feel the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had never been a man to shy away from difficult choices, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. This wasn't just a matter of law or reason. This was something far older, far darker, and it was a force that couldn't be ignored. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second like a hammer pounding in his chest. Clara's eyes flickered to the clock, then back to Hawthorne. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence between them was deafening, filled with the unspoken understanding of the choice that lay ahead. "I don't know if I can do this," Hawthorne finally said, his voice breaking the silence. He was speaking to her, but also to himself. One life, for all the others. Clara's gaze softened, but there was no pity in her eye. She had seen too much, lived through too much, to offer him comfort. She nodded slowly. "Yes, one life, for all the others. It's the only way to lift the curse." Hawthorne closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady the whirlwind of thoughts and emotions that threatened to overtake him. He had been a man of order, of justice. This was something entirely different. This was a matter of life and death, of sacrifice and consequence, and it was beyond the reach of any law he had ever sworn to uphold. The room felt colder still, as if the house itself was breathing down his neck. He could hear faint whispers again, the same ones that had plagued him since his arrival. They were becoming clearer now, more insistent, but the voices weren't speaking to him anymore. They were speaking for the land, demanding the sacrifice be made. They were calling for blood. "Clara," he said, his voice hoarse, "you knew this was coming, didn't you?" Her face was a mask of grief and resignation. "I did," she whispered. "I've known for years. The land has always taken, always demanded. The Carter family, they never had a chance. None of us did." Hawthorne's gaze dropped to the book in his hand. The pages seemed to pulse with life, as if the words were calling out to him, urging him to act. He had known there would be a cost when he first stepped into this cursed house, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Nothing could. "Whose blood?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He felt his hands shaking as he held the book, the weight of the decision overwhelming him. Clara's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw the depth of the sacrifice in her gaze. It must be someone tied to the land, someone whose bloodline has been touched by the curse. Hawthorne felt his heart race. He had thought about it, but now the reality of the choice hit him harder than he ever expected. He could already feel the weight of the decision, the consequences that would follow. The land had chosen, the ritual had begun, and now there was no turning back. "I'm the last one left," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "The last of the Carter family. The land has claimed us all, one by one."
Hawthorne's breath caught in his throat as the truth settled in. Clara wasn't just a bystander in this twisted fate. She was the heart of it, the final piece of the puzzle. The land had taken everything from her, her family, her history. Now, it demanded the last sacrifice. The realization hit him with the force of a tidal wave. Clara had known this was her fate. All along, she had been preparing for it, living with the knowledge that one day, she would have to give herself to the land to break the curse. She had waited for this moment, knowing it would come, but never fully prepared to face it. He took a step toward her, the book still clenched in his hands. "You don't have to do this. I can." "No," she interrupted, her voice firm. "It's not your choice, Sheriff. The land has already chosen me. I am the last of my bloodline. I've always known what had to be done. And now, it's my turn." Hawthorne's heart ached as he looked at her. She wasn't just a victim in this twisted tale. She was the answer, the key to ending the curse. But at what cost? Her life, her very soul. He didn't know if he could stand by and watch her give herself to the land, to the ritual that would end it all. Clara stepped forward, her eyes filled with quiet determination. "There's no time. The land is waiting. The ritual must be completed." Hawthorne's mind raced. He couldn't deny what had to be done. He had seen the signs, felt the power of the curse that held this place in its grip. The Carter family had been lost to it. The others had been taken, and now it was Clara's turn. "Clara," Hawthorne whispered, reaching out to her, but she took another step back, a faint, sad smile playing on her lips. "It's my destiny," she said softly, almost to herself. "It always was." The wind outside howled louder now, a constant reminder of the storm that raged beyond the house. The ritual was nearing its final moment. The blood must be spilled, the curse lifted, and the land would have its sacrifice. Clara turned to face the book, her hands trembling as she opened it once more. The symbols on the pages seemed to glow faintly, urging her forward. She looked at Hawthorne one last time, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. "It's done," she said, her voice quiet, but resolute. "The land will be free." Hawthorne stood frozen, his mind spinning, his heart heavy with the weight of what was happening. There was nothing more he could do. The ritual had begun, and now it was too late to stop it. As Clara began to recite the final words of the ritual, the room seemed to tremble. The ground beneath them shook, and for a brief moment, Hawthorne felt a surge of power, as if the very earth itself was coming alive. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the shaking stopped, the whispers grew silent, the wind died down, the curse was lifted, but Clara was gone. The silence that followed Clara's sacrifice was deafening. The house, once alive with the restless whispers of the past, now stood still, its very walls holding their breath. Hawthorne stood in the center of the room, his mind reeling, his heart pounding in his chest. He could still feel Clara's presence, as if her spirit lingered in the very air, unwilling to leave until the curse was truly broken. But she was gone. The book lay open in front of him, The final words of the ritual now burned into his memory. There had been no grand explosion, no magical light show, no dramatic end, just a quiet, terrible finality. Clara had done what needed to be done, and now the land would be free. But at what cost? Hawthorne couldn't bring himself to look at the book anymore. The power that had radiated from it now seemed to be nothing more than a cold emptiness. The curse was lifted, yes, but it felt like the house itself had absorbed a piece of Clara's soul, and now it was all gone. The land had its payment. The Carter family's bloodline, once so deeply tied to this cursed place, had been severed, leaving nothing but the ghosts of what had come before. He walked slowly to the window, his hands still trembling. Outside, the wind had stopped, and the sky had cleared. The storm that had raged for so long was gone. The world outside was calm, but within the house, a deep sorrow hung in the air like a heavy fog. Hawthorne glanced down at the floor, his eyes falling on the old rug where Clara had stood just moments before. There was no sign of her, no indication of what had happened. It was as if she had simply vanished, leaving behind only a lingering chill in the room. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. There was no more time for grief, no more time for hesitation. The curse was gone, and the Carter family's story had come to its tragic, inevitable end. But something deep within him still couldn't shake the feeling that the house had taken something more than just Clara. It had taken her hope, her humanity, and in doing so, it had erased any trace of the family's once glorious past. The air grew thick again, as though the land was now aware of what had been done. Hawthorne could feel it, a heaviness that weighed down on him with every breath he took. It was as if the land itself was mourning the loss of the Carter family, mourning the severing of its bloodline, its claim on the house. But it was done. The land had been freed, and the curse had been lifted. There was no longer any need to stay. The Carter family was no more. Clara had given her life for this, and now there was nothing left for Hawthorne to do but leave. He turned away from the window and picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. The room seemed colder now, as though the warmth that had once filled it had been sucked away, leaving behind only an emptiness. He stepped toward the door, but as his hand reached for the knob, something caught his eye. It was a small, delicate object, tucked into the corner of the room, half hidden beneath a pile of old, forgotten papers. Hawthorne bent down to pick it up, his heart skipping a beat when he realized what it was. A locket. He opened it carefully, his fingers brushing the worn metal. Inside there was a faded photograph of Clara as a child, smiling brightly, surrounded by her family. It was a glimpse of a time before the curse, before the house had claimed them all, before the family had been lost to history. Hawthorne's chest tightened as he stared at the picture. Clara had been just a child then, full of hope and innocence, unaware of the dark fate that awaited her. She had been the last one left, the final piece in the puzzle that had tied her family to this cursed place. But now, it was all over. The curse was broken. The Carter family was no more. And yet, as he stood there, holding the locket in his hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left undone. The house had taken Clara, but it had also given him a part of her, this small token of her life before the curse had taken hold. It was as if the land had given him this final piece to carry with him, a reminder of what had been lost. Hawthorne closed the locket and tucked it into his pocket, his fingers lingering on it for just a moment longer than necessary. It was time to go. The house no longer had any hold on him. The curse had been lifted. The Carter family's story had ended, and now, it was time for him to leave. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway, the cold air biting at his skin. The house seemed to sigh around him, as if it too had accepted the end of the family's long-held grip on it. Hawthorne didn't look back. He knew there was nothing left for him here. As he walked down the stairs and out into the quiet night, the first rays of dawn began to break through the trees. The world was still and calm. The house was silent, its long history finally at peace. But Hawthorne couldn't shake the feeling that the land had claimed more than just Clara. It had taken the Carter family's bloodline, their legacy, their memories, and it had left behind nothing but a hollow echo. As he stepped away from the house and into the sunlight, he wondered if he would ever truly escape the shadows of the Carter family's past. Would anyone ever be able to forget
The curse that had bound them to this land, the answer he knew was no. The land would always remember, the house would always remember, and no matter how far he ran, the echoes of the Carter family's tragedy would follow him forever. The curse was lifted, but the story was far from over. The sun had set on the Carter family's house, leaving behind only the silhouette of the long-forgotten estate, now a mere shadow of its former glory. The trees stood like sentinels, their branches reaching out, as if to protect the remnants of what once was. For Hawthorne, the walk back to the car felt long and heavy, each step seeming to echo the weight of the history he had just uncovered. The Carter family's bloodline was no more, their secrets buried beneath the earth. But as he made his way back to the car, his mind raced with question. The curse had been broken. Yes, the final piece had been put into place, but the lingering sense of unease gnawed at him. Was that truly the end, or had something deeper, more insidious, been left behind? He opened the car door, the cold metal clashing against the warmth of his palm. But before he could get inside, something stopped him. A sound, faint but unmistakable. It came from behind him, from the direction of the house. It was a whisper. His heart skipped a beat. Was it the wind? His mind wrestled with the possibility. But the voice, it felt too real, too familiar. Hawthorne turned around slowly, as if drawn by an unseen force. The house stood silent, its dark windows staring back at him. The wind rustled the leaves, but that was it. No movement, no lights. Yet the whisper was still there, louder this time. Help. It was Clara's voice. His breath caught in his throat. Was this possible? Was this some kind of lingering echo of her spirit? A final plea from the other side. He had done everything. The ritual was complete. The curse lifted. But this was different. The voice was not just a memory. It was real. It was a cry for help. Hawthorne's instincts kicked in. He couldn't just leave. Not with this hanging in the air. The car door slammed shut behind him as he ran back toward the house, his heart pounding in his chest. The path, once so familiar, now felt darker, more sinister, as if the house itself were drawing him back in. He reached the front door, his hand trembling as he placed it on the doorknob. It creaked open with a faint groan, the same way it had when he first arrived. The house was waiting, as if it had always been waiting for him. He stepped inside, the air thick and heavy with the weight of years of secrets. The hallway stretched out before him, the walls seeming to breathe in the dim light. As he moved deeper into the house, the whisper grew louder, clearer. It wasn't just Clara's voice anymore. It was joined by others, a chorus of voices distant, and yet close enough to send a chill down his spine. Help us! Help us! Hawthorne's breath came in short bursts as he moved down the hallway, his feet dragging on the worn floorboard. The voices led him to the grand staircase, its railing old and weathered. He could feel the presence of the house all around him, pressing in like a heavy fog. The voices were coming from upstairs. Hawthorne's hand shook as he gripped the railing, pulling himself up the staircase. The steps creaked beneath his weight, but there was no turning back now. He had to know. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched before him, dimly lit by the faint glow of moonlight filtering through the cracked windows. The air felt thicker here, the weight of it oppressed. The voices were louder now, almost deafening. He walked cautiously down the hallway, his steps hesitant, but determined. The doors on either side were closed, but there was one at the very end of the hall that stood slightly ajar. The voices seemed to be coming from behind that door. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open. Inside was a small room. The walls were covered in faded wallpaper, the once vibrant patterns now peeling away. A single chair sat in the center of the room, facing the wall. The room was empty, save for that but it wasn't the room itself that sent a wave of horror through him. It was what was in the chair, a figure, a shadow, the outline of a person slumped forward, as if in defeat. Hawthorne's blood ran cold. It was Clara. Her hair, once so full of life, was now limp and tangled. Her eyes were open, but empty, as though the life had been drained from her. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls moving ever closer, as if the house was breathing in time with his own panic. Clara, he whispered, stepping forward. But as he did, the figure shifted slowly, agonizingly, and then, a voice, help me. It wasn't Clara's voice anymore, it was a chorus of voices that echoed through the room. His legs felt weak, but he couldn't stop himself. He reached out, his hand trembling as it hovered above the figure, and then he understood. The curse was never truly lifted. The house had taken everything, the bloodline, the lives, the very souls of the Carter family had been consumed, and in return, the house had kept them. It had kept their memories, their voices, their suffering, and now, it was trying to pull him in. Hawthorne stepped back, fear coursing through his veins. He needed to leave, he needed to get out. But before he could turn around, the door slammed shut behind him. The whispering grew louder, deafening. "Help us." The walls seemed to close in on him. The voices now a cacophony, each one louder than the last. He was trapped, he was part of the house now, and as he stood there, unable to move, he realized the terrible truth. The Carter family wasn't gone. The house hadn't just claimed their bloodline, it had claimed their very souls, and now, it was claiming him too. The last thing Hawthorne heard before everything went black was the sound of the whispers, and then silence. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mysteries that will keep you on the edge of your seat.